Then it's my pleasure this morning to welcome our guest speaker. As international citizens, most expats in San Miguel de Allende are interested in keeping abreast of what is going on in both Mexico and the United States, vis-à-vis culture, economics, entertainment, the environment, history, politics, and spirituality. Enter LifeLong Learning, which has courses on all of these topics in its 2026 curriculum at Instituto Allende. 2 of the 21 presenters for their program between January and March will be NBC Middle East expert Martin Fletcher, who has spoken here, an expert on Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum, and other presenters explore archaeology, art, cryptocurrency, culture, ethics, humor, indigenous cultures, journalism, Judaism, literature, Mexican cinema, music, psychiatry, U.S. and Mexico relations, and water. Today, Lifelong Learning Team leader John Wimberly will share more about these presenters, their topics, and the lifelong learning experience. John's background includes orchestrating generational shifts, program development, social justice, and spiritual leadership in Washington, D.C. He earned a PhD in systematic theology after earning 2 master's degrees and a bachelor's degree. This led him into social justice leadership, where John's accomplishments include successes in the areas of healthcare, homelessness, intercultural understanding, poverty, spirituality, and women's rights. He is most proud of his work with Archbishop Desmond Tutu. As a result, he was inducted into an elite society of clergy in the Washington, D.C. Hall of Fame. For this reason, he is still actively consulting congregations in the United States. So please help me welcome John Wimberly to the Rotary Podium.
Thank you so much for having me back again. It's always great to see all of you. I have a little water. So before I talk about lifelong learning, I want to talk a little bit about the Instituto, which is there's some really exciting things going on there. As many of you know, the Instituto was jointly owned originally by Jaime and his brother Rudy, who was one of my best friends in San Miguel. Rudy died, so his daughters, Zara and Eva, inherited that part of the Instituto, which includes the school. Jaime still is the owner of the part where the big ceremonial courtyard where all the weddings are, that kind of stuff. And Eva lives in the Yucatan, but she is kind of the driving force. I mean, Zara is certainly with her on it, but in doing a major transformation of what the Instituto has been in San Miguel, she's going to turn it into, and is turning it into, a major cultural center instead of just a school, which was Rudy's focus. And so what are some examples of that? She just is completing right now a 110-seat theater that has a very large stage on it, that's going to allow for both theater as well as performing arts of all types. Some of our classes, our larger classes, will probably end up in there. That theater was always there, but it was basically unusable because it was dangerous. And just the steps were dangerous. It was dark. It was just a bad space. So they literally, brought in a backhoe and they just went down to the ground and then they built it up again with the right level on it. She's going to have basically develop a way to walk through the property that'll be totally accessible. It'll be lined with shops and various kinds of things. There's one of San Miguel's, in my opinion, best architects and builders. Raul Barrera is the person she's hired to do all of this work. Our classroom was significantly upgraded. So it's going to take a while. It's going to take a lot of money, but that's where the Instituto is headed. And I think it's going to transform that end of town in some ways. In the same way that the Fabrica transformed that end of town. So that's what's going on there. In terms of lifelong learning, I got involved when Joe Sanders left, who started the program and ran it for 10 years. And then it shut down because nobody was willing to do the job that I'm doing now. And Rudy kept asking me to do it. I kept saying no, but Rudy is a pretty convincing guy. So finally I said yes. And I'm glad I did. It's been a lot of fun. It's a lot of work. I meet a lot of very interesting people because San Miguel is filled with interesting people. When I took over, our attendance in terms of registrations was a little under 400. That was, I'm in my fourth year with it now. As of the start of class, before we even had a class, our registrations were 820 this year, so more than doubled. And my guess is we'll easily move over 900. We might start approaching 1,000. And we've been limited by that classroom, which it used to only hold 50, now it holds about 60. But now that we've got eventually we'll have access to this theater within a couple of months. And at that point, there'll be some of the classes that are suited for a larger audience. We could use it and get up to 100. So there's a lot of good energy there. And one of the things that's fun is in my role, I'm the one who looks for instructors, and people come to me. And as the program has grown, the number of people who've been coming to me and saying I can teach, and some of them can, some of them can't. I will tell you that. And my job is to make sure the ones that can't don't teach. And so I was a pastor in Washington for 40 years, so I have a pretty thick skin. So I don't mind telling people no. And we are getting, San Miguel, as you know, attracts some very interesting people that either live here full time or visit here, particularly at this time of year. And so, we're getting some of them. So one of the people teaching a course right now is Richard Ellis is an amazing photographer who had 3 nominations for Pulitzer Prizes. He was the first person into Tiananmen Square when that tragedy happened. How did he get there? He got on a bus filled with peasants and laid on the floor and told them to let him know when the bus stopped in Tiananmen Square. And he got out and he took pictures. I mean, these people, just like Martin Fletcher, who you've heard, I mean, they literally put their lives at risk so that we can get the story. And so having people like this here, having people like this who are willing to teach has been really exciting. We have Joe, who you met just a minute ago, who's going to be teaching the course on the U.S.-Mexico War. Joe is the leader, basically has my function at a huge lifelong learning program at American University in D.C. And he teaches the course that he's going to be teaching for us both in D.C. and here. He's taught it several times here before. And it's an essential, if you're going to stay and live in San Miguel, it's really something we need to know, because there is a reason why Mexicans feel the way they do about the American government. Gratefully, they don't feel that way about us so much, but they feel that way about because there's a history there that we need to understand. We've got a fellow named Dr. Alef, who's a Canadian, who's going to teach a course on psychiatry. He teaches this at a university in Canada. He's been teaching it at Palm Springs for years. He decided that because of various political issues going on, that he'd rather teach it in Mexico than Palm Springs in the United States this winter. So we're direct beneficiaries of that. So that's all for the good. Travis is going to come in and do what we're calling a Shanebaum report card. That should be fascinating. There are a lot of people. We've got 85. If the theater's done, we may move it into the theater. If not, we'll have it in one of the outside courtyards at the Instituto. Phil Silver is probably one of our most popular teachers. He's in the Canadian Hall of Fame, an incredible costume and set designer. And he's going to do, I'll just read the title because it says it all. Many Coats, Many Colors, Jewish Clothing Across Time and Place. And Phil is he's not only incredible at what he did professionally, he's just an amazing teacher, and he's got a big draw. You all know about Caminos de Agua. We have them come in once a year in a free class, and we are doing that again this year. I'm such a huge fan of that organization. We got a guy who contacted me by email, and he said I could teach a course on Bitcoin and cryptocurrency if you wanted to. And I said, send me your stuff. And he sent me his stuff, and I went, yeah, we want you to teach that course. So he's going to be doing a one day session for 3 hours. Most of our classes are from 1 to 3. There's a woman named Lola Reed Allen who kind of immersed herself in the Wakanda culture, and she's going to do a course on that should be fascinating. Jesus Ibarra, who you know, is teaching a course that he's done before that is absolutely fascinating on Mexican cinema. And he goes back to the silent movies part of Mexican cinema and moves forward. It is an absolutely brilliant repeat, which is why we're repeating it. A number of these courses are sold out. You can look on the website and see for yourself. Michael Hope is a well-known composer. I mean, he was nominated for a Grammy Award. He is like incredibly, I mean, I think he's a few years older than me. He's like a superstar in South Korea. He goes to South Korea and they just like sell out everything. And it's all these kids who normally would be at a K-pop, type concert. And what Michael's going to do for us, I think is fascinating. First, he was a little reluctant to teach. He's not a natural born teacher, but he's good friends with Martin Fletcher, and I'm good friends with Martin Fletcher. So we talked, and Martin is going to interview him about his career, because before he was a composer, he was an executive in one of the largest, Polygram, I think is the name, one of the largest labels of producing music. He signed ABBA, he signed The Who. I mean, he was doing all that kind of stuff before he started actually deciding, you know what, I don't want to sign musicians, I want to create music. So, and then he went into this career. And then what I think is going to be pretty cool is he's going to bring in an electric piano, and he and the class are going to write a song together. He's going to have people give him notes, and then he's going to take those notes and he's going to start with those notes and create something right before us. There's a fellow named Michael Soloff who I haven't met, but I've talked to a lot because I had to set up this course, and he's teaching a course on the Beatles. That one may be sold out. I'm not sure because there's so many boomers in this city. The history of art in San Miguel de Allende is Natalie Taylor. I think many of you know Natalie. She did some of this last year, and everybody raved about it, so we brought her back to do some more. One of our leadership team, Barbara Kalis, is going to do a course on American humor. And then there's this young woman who came to me and said, I'd like to teach a course. And I said, what is it? And she explained that she's working on a doctorate in literature in Canada. And she's going to teach 2 short courses at the end in March. And what she's going to do, the first one's called The Logic of Sherlock. And she's going to take some Sherlock stories, and then she's also knows ethics really well. So what she's going to do is she's going to say, here are the major logical systems in the philosophical world. How does Sherlock use them? And what system is he use when he solves this? What logical system does he use when he does that one? And then same thing, she's going to do a course, Ethics with Jane Austen, and she's going to have people will read one of the books, and she's going to say and then she'll go through, kind of outline the ethical systems in the world, and she'll go, what ethical system does each character represent? I think it's going to be fascinating, and she's a really bright, engaging young woman. So those are our classes. I urge you to register because the ones that aren't sold out some of them are close. There are a few where we put a lower ceiling. Like leading a course starting this afternoon on death and dying. It's actually called Death and Dying in San Miguel because it's going to be very pragmatic in the sessions 2 and 3. I'm bringing in people like Nancy Stitch from the hospice, different people who are, Sarah Ash, people like that who know the ins and outs, Gina from the 24-Hour Association, all these people you've spoken to. But I want, so many of us, when you get to my age, we talk, we know we're supposed to be getting stuff in order, and we keep saying, I need to get stuff in order, and we don't get stuff in order. And so this particular class, I limited 25 because I just thought I didn't want it to be like this where I'm lecturing about something as sensitive as death and dying. But, and I will just say, as a little insight. So I read a book that I highly recommend. It's called The Other Side of Sadness, and there's a revised version of this book out now, updated version is, I guess, best term. And in it, he really challenges Kubler-Ross in the famous 5 stages of grief. And as a pastor, I can tell you, I learned to challenge. I was like drilled with her when I was in seminary, because I was in seminary in 1972 and 3, and her book about the stages of grief on death and dying came out in 1969, so everybody was all over it. And but when I became a pastor, I realized people do not just go through these things. I mean, people are people. We're all different, and we process stuff differently. And he really challenges the notion that everybody has to, begins with denial, and then they go to anger, and then they start bargaining, et cetera, through the various stages. And I think it's really important for us to know. But because we start, I mean, how many times have you heard somebody say about somebody, a friend, a mutual friend, I think she's in denial, or I think he's just really enraged. And in fact, the research, the current research on this, which is built on thousands and thousands of people in these studies, shows that 85%, sometimes 85 to 90% of people who go through grief go through it relatively easily, for lack of a better word. In other words, they go through it relatively smoothly. It's not a crisis. They don't need to see a therapist, etc. It's a crisis in the fact that they've lost a loved one, which is a huge crisis. But it doesn't have to become a therapeutic crisis, which is what we've turned. There's a whole industry that's been built around death and dying. I'm not going to do the whole class from today, this afternoon. But I'm like passionate about this subject, which is why I decided to teach it. But also just getting the nuts and bolts together. And there's a guy named Ron Jackson who's in a men's group that I'm in. And he's got the most comprehensive list of, he's like almost an obsessive about this stuff. And, that your survivors will need to know. And if they don't know, there could be like an account over here. They couldn't get a safe deposit box there because they don't know where any of this stuff is. And we owe it to people we love who will survive us to get that stuff. So I'll open up for questions, but I do have to say, as a Wisconsinite, a diehard Badger, for you to say that the worst year of your life was in Milwaukee, I'm just pretend I never heard that. I'm going to pretend I never heard that. You can't spend a bad year in Milwaukee. You didn't eat the right bratwurst, I'm telling you right now, or drink the right beer, one or the other. So are there any questions or comments either about the Institute itself or about the courses and what we're trying to do? And by the way, if any of you want to teach a class or any of you know somebody who should be teaching a class, please email me because that's how I get all my teachers. So go ahead.
Do we just go to the Instituto website?
If you go to the Instituto website, and then there's a link at the top, and you'll get for the learning experiences. He's got one back here. Just one second. That's okay.
Yeah, hello. I'm from Appleton, Wisconsin.
All
I'm
right.
just wondering what.
See, you were offended, weren't you? I mean, that was just terrible.
I was. I didn't want to say anything because I'm too polite. But yeah.
I'm not polite, so that's, what are you going to do? All right, we got a question up here.
Sure. Yeah, my question is, maybe you indicated this when I stepped out of the room, but I was just curious how you became involved in this in terms of the continuing education, and maybe just tell us a little bit about that. You told us a little bit about your background, but
Yeah,
it's a bit of a shift, so,
right.
yep.
Well, I mean, it's a bit of a shift, but as a pastor, you're an educator. I mean, you really are. And as a community activist, I'm an educator. You know, I mean, I was president of the ACLU, and so what are we doing? We're educating people on human rights and civil rights. You know, I mean, it's just that's what I've done my whole life, is, in my opinion. My wife taught in the DC public schools for 40 years, which is also, she was an educator, so we're both really committed to that. But I mean, long story short, it was because Rudy asked me to, and I couldn't say no anymore. I'm so glad I did. And as you know, I mean, I hope everybody here knows, there's a huge mental health connection and physical health connection between keeping our brains active through education, reading, etc., and living a long life. And so, I mean, I feel like I'm not only doing a public service because I'm giving you all, as well as all of these instructors, an opportunity to get together. But I also think, from a health perspective, it's a big deal too. I've always viewed my role as a broker. And what I mean by that is, so there are people in this case, there are people in San Miguel who want to learn, and there are people who have incredible teaching skills or experiences. And so I broker and put them together. When I was in Washington, we started a feeding program for the homeless. And today, well, they're still feeding. I mean, it was 1985, so 40 years later, they're still feeding people. It's now a $5 million a year program. But my point is, people said, how did you come up with that idea? And I said, I'm a broker. I said, I had all these homeless people coming to the door of my church saying, have you got something you can give me? I'm hungry. And I was surrounded by IMF, World Bank, White House. I mean, it was all right around this church I was serving for 30 years. And I knew there were all kinds of people in there who were committed to helping people who were hungry. So my job as the broker was to put the two parties together. So, I mean, this is just a continuation of the way I kind of approach life, or right or wrong, better or worse, right? Yeah.
Hi, I'm also a fellow Wisconsinite. And
All right.
Gary,
see?
I'm offended. Yeah. Well, my question is,
He's going to explain. He says,
yeah, exactly. My question is, okay, they're creating this theater or renovating it.
right.
What type classes do you think would be so big you'd fill the room?
The type of thing that Travis is going to do, which is like we've got 85 people just signed, like, on the internet, like almost in a couple of days when we put it up. And it really wasn't supposed to get that big, but the person who was running that site didn't know they were supposed to stop at 50. But anyway, but there will be anything that would be comfortable with a lecture is fine. But if you want something that's more interactive, like last week we had a class on Baldwin, and the fellow who was teaching it's a retired professor in Iowa, Luther College in Iowa, and he made the class very interactive. There were 60 people in the classroom, but it was still possible to do that. But when you got people tiered back to the tune of 110 people, it's going to be a lecture. I mean, there'll be some people who get to ask some questions, but to me, one of my tasks going forward is going to be to make some decisions about which classes can use the bigger room, the theater, and which classes need to stay in the size of about 60 students. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Are the classes are the classes a mixture? What languages? I mean, is it a mix of English, Spanish? I mean, how does that work?
This is my biggest failure, and I'm a big believer in acknowledging failures as well as successes. I wanted to have Spanish-speaking classes, and we haven't done that yet. And I can't do it by myself. And I need to find the partners in the Mexican community who can run that, basically. And we would support it, give it space, give it money, whatever we have to do. But when I first took over with Rudy, I said, I'm not going to run a program that's just English speaking, where we're only 10% of the population and 90% of the population speaking Spanish. And here I am doing exactly what I told Rudy I wouldn't do. And Rudy's in heaven looking down going, Wimberly, you told me. So we're going to get there, but I have not done it yet. And I need to put some more energy into that. So thanks for asking that. Milwaukee.
Okay. How many people here are from or have ever lived in Wisconsin? Okay, well, I misspoke. It was my wife's worst year of her life. And that made it worse for me.
Okay.
The problem was we went through 3 blizzards. Belantic lost the mayor's race the following year. It was that winter. And the people that bought my house in San Antonio recently are from Eau Claire, Wisconsin. So I now love Wisconsin.
That's great. All right. Well, thanks again for having me. It's always a joy and a pleasure to come. And you all do such amazing work. I mean, your story about going to Bolivia, just brought tears to my eyes. I mean, because those are life-transforming experiences. So thank you for what you
Any other
do.
questions for John?